The opinions and views expressed by individuals during this broadcast are their own. They may not be the opinions of this network, their groups, or other organizations they may be involved with.
Ganja my meditation, ganja my brain. Ganja we take away my stress and strain. Ganja my meditation, ganja in my brain. Marijuana take away my stress and pain. Ganja my meditation, ganja in my brain. Marijuana take away the stress and pain. Ganja is the medication, ganja is the cure. Police of them a fight the marijuana for sure. Purify me heavens and they make me feel pure. And the way the quality we be bring it on door. Ganja in the meditation, ganja in my clothes. No offense, I'm smoking another one around you. Ganja in me daily, ganja me currency. Ganja is the currency and daily pay. Give me the revelation, it's not to get too much when it's been growing. So long, that's why we call it.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Ganja News Update for this Monday, June the 3rd, 2024, for episode 82 here on NOK Network, the video news podcast focused on cannabis news being reported in mainstream media. I'm joined by my amazing joint host, Tarra Simpson. Hello, Tarra, and how are you today?
I'm great, Ron. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. I had an awesome weekend. That went from Ontario here, just south of North Bay, up to Rouyn-Noranda in Quebec, about 4.5-hour drive north of here, to visit my son and his family. And it was my granddaughter's second birthday, and we had a blast.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw all your new Liskert, and you were all over the place.
Yeah, new Liskert, tobogganing.
Yeah, and I mean, you stay pretty close to home, so that road trip was pretty special for you.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And you know what? I'm going back up that way in a month's time, up to Kim's.
Yes.
So that's going to be awesome for the Stoner Games.
Absolutely. 710 Stoner Games. If you don't have your judges kits, get online and get that rocking.
Yeah, for the Stoner Games Cup.
Yes, and come on up. Come have a great weekend at the 710 Stoner Games. I went last year. It was fantastic. Kim's an amazing host. Her property is fantastic, very off-grid, huge field, just very hippie vibes and good times. And this year we have a band. So
I was going to say, we got live band.
Absolutely. So get your tickets on Eventbrite for the 710 Stoner Games as soon as you can, because there won't be sales at the gates. So we need to know you're coming so we can prepare for the big barbecue and entertainment and accommodations,
It's going to be a great time. Last year was a blast. It was my first year going up, but this year I think it's going to be even better. I can feel it. I can feel it. I feel the energy. Feel the energy.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great vibes last year. I met so many people I didn't even know existed, and we were all like family by the end of the weekends. We just had an absolute amazing time. So if you want to get away for a weekend and go off grid and just have some fun and participate in some family friendly party games with a stoner twist, again, 19 and over, come on up. It's a blast.
And of course there'll be cannabis and mushrooms.
I'm sure that some of us mushy heads will partake in Friday night's pre-party psychedelic night as we did last year. That was a lot of fun. Bring your own and consume responsibly and stay on site.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I guess we need to get to doing what we're here for now. So we're here to read the news. So now for our top stories in cannabis news. First story we're bringing to you is coming to us from, let's go change the format here, from Global News.
Yes.
ER visits among seniors rose after legalization, study finds. This here's from the Canadian Press. It was posted on May 21st, 2024, with an update later in the day that same day. Goes on here to say a new study has linked the legalization of cannabis with a rise in the number of Ontario seniors visiting emergency rooms. The number of people aged 65 and over checking into ERs in Ontario for what amounted to cannabis poisoning grew sharply over an 8-year period, particularly after cannabis was legalized, according to the report published Monday in the peer-reviewed medical journal JAMA International Medicine. These are not people, this is a quote, these are not people getting too high, being giddy and laughing, said Dr. Nathan Stahl, a geriatric specialist at Sinai Health in Toronto and lead author of the report. He goes on to say, these are people very sick to the point where healthcare practitioners, without knowing that they've consumed cannabis, consider other health conditions like stroke, serious infection, and other serious metabolic abnormalities.
Yeah, so the study examined 3 periods over 8 years using identified Ontario Ministry Health administrative data to get a sense of shifts in ER visits by older adults. The first window covered pre-legalization spanning from early 2015 until June, just before legalization in October of 2018. While the second period started when dried cannabis sales were rolled out, the third span covered nearly 3 years after edibles were introduced into the market in January of 2020. The study reported the pre-legalization rate of emergency visits among older adults, which stood at 5.8 per 100,000, soared to 15.4 per 100,000 during the first phase of legalization. The rate rose again to 21.1 per 100,000 once edibles were legalized. Researchers suggest the data may underestimate the magnitude of cannabis poisonings in older adults, since the study only tracks ER visits and doesn't account for people who sought care elsewhere or not at all. Stahl said the legalization of edibles occurred just before the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns, which may have deterred some people from visiting ERs. The finding comes after several recent studies outlined a rise in the number of kids hospitalized for accidental cannabis poisonings after legalization. Those figures saw a notable spike after edibles such as THC-infused gummies, chocolates, and baked goods were approved for sale in 2020. So I find this very interesting because this study covers pre-legalization versus legalization. So interestingly enough, that during pre-legalization, when this was everywhere and there were dispensaries running technically illegally and Legacy was doling out all sorts of goods to people everywhere, that we didn't have this problem. So I feel that this is going in a way of lack of education in the legal market for patients who are purchasing. That's the feel I get from this. What about you, Ron?
Yeah, I kind of get that as well. But I also would like to add, I do see a possibility of numbers spiking after legalization because of the fact it is legal, that it is now legal, right? So people kind of go to the hospital without the fear of having any negative. Well, you can still have healthcare practitioners that have negative views towards cannabis,
right?
But it is legal. So that hesitation of going into the hospital because you're doing something illegal, that's taken away.
True. That could have a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, same thing with children going into the hospitals or whatever, or seeing medical practitioners due to unintended cannabis ingestion. Is people don't have that fear of being put in jail for having something that's illegal because it's a legal product. Yeah, there may be some consequences, but certainly a lot less than what they were.
Right. On that note, though, parents, lock up your stash. If you have children under 19 in the house, it's just like any other medication. It should be in a lockbox, stashed away. If it's a refrigeratable, have a separate little mini fridge, put a lock on it. Keep your kids safe. Cannabis won't necessarily kill them, but it's not going to make them feel very good.
Exactly. And the other thing too is if you are making your own edibles, or even if you have purchased stuff, make sure that they're properly labeled and easily identified, even for adults of all ages, but especially
because if grandma comes for a visit and she doesn't know those cookies in the fridge are spiked, grandma's not going to have a good experience.
Exactly. And that's some of that is what is those people that we're talking about in the story that come across. They go to a family function and they grab a cookie or whatever, or they eat a meal or like a meal component, and they don't know that it's been infused. And then there you go. So they may even not be sure what's happening, because sometimes they don't find out until afterwards. Then you get someone. Then you get someone. The family member says, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Those were infused cookies. I didn't label them."
Right. Yeah. So a 2022 report published in the New England Journal of Medicine, for instance, found hospitalizations jumped more than 2.5 times immediately after Canada greenlit the recreational use of cannabis. The study looked at cases in Ontario, Alberta, British Columbia, and Quebec. The hospitalization rates rose again in Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia after those provinces approved edibles in January of 2020, while the rates stayed the same in Quebec, which did not permit edible sales.
While Stahl's report on older adults only included ER visits and not rates of hospitalization, he said the data, quote, saw similar effects of increasing hospitalization for cannabis poisoning with the legalization of edibles, end quote. The latest study of older adults was unable to conclude how many of the poisonings were intentional, such as self-medicating, or unintentional, such as accidental ingestion, but Stahl said it's likely many users hadn't accounted for other factors before consuming cannabis. For instance, he said users who use cannabis coupled with other medications could experience negative effects or unintended drug interactions, while changes to the body fat composition with age could affect how quickly the drug left people's bodies. Some older adults who consumed may also have been unfamiliar with how edibles differ from smoking cannabis, he added. And I want to make that point here about the unintended drug interactions. That is a real thing. I've experienced that myself, where you have the effects of a certain drug may be increased, and along comes the bad side effects as well, or the efficacy of the drug could be reduced, causing other complications. I think this is one area where Health Canada has dropped the ball big time in proper education for people who are on medications, and because of the fact that you can't even just go to your doctor and ask, because your doctor doesn't know, because they're not. Most of your doctors are not allowed to talk about cannabis for fear of retribution from repercussions from the College of Physicians and Surgeons or the CMA.
Right.
So it's kind of a backward system. We have a medical program, but we don't have any medical cannabis and no medical guidance, true medical guidance, because it's not classified as medicine. So I think that's a large part of these numbers that you're seeing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. especially
And
in
again,
the
a lot of
seniors.
those older adults too now, because it is legal, they're like, hey, I want to relive my younger
Exactly.
years and I'm going to try this. And again, not having the proper education and guidance from somebody
Right.
who understands, some pharmaceuticals could be increased, like if they're on
Yep.
opioids for pain, right? And now they're trying cannabis to
Yep.
treat that, and they're taking both at the same time. Again, that could increase the drowsiness and the effects of an
Yep.
edible. And again, with unintended effects, and now of course they don't know what's happening to them, so they go to the ER, right?
Yep.
um,
Exactly. And
yes,
then the doctors are left wondering what the hell's happened, because they may not even know that they took that edible. Like, it may have been a cookie that
right,
they didn't know
because
was
they look at
infused.
this 65-year-old who's like, 65, they don't think cannabis.
Exactly.
And maybe that person doesn't want to tell them because they're not
Right.
feeling well, or they feel they might be stigmatized.
Yeah.
Right, so there's a lot of factors here.
Because the
Absolutely.
stigma still does exist, big time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially in the medical field, but I will say it is opening up big time. It is opening up.
Yeah.
I've had a good experience myself with a health condition I've had over this past year, where I've openly talked about cannabis, and it is changing out there.
Yeah.
But
I've been trying to
takes
change my
us
doctors.
people.
Yeah.
It takes us people who have experienced it to educate the doctors.
Absolutely.
If Health Canada is not going to do it, and the College of Physicians and the CMA, then let's us do it.
I've been a licensed patient since 2012, and I have since 2012 been very open with my family doctor about the fact that I'm going as pharma-free as possible, as quickly as possible with cannabis, and have continued to educate her anytime she's tried to, offer me a medication, or, I'll go home and take some herbs, or I'll go home and, I just need to know that I'm not, super sick, or, so education is key, right?
100%.
Yeah.
So anyways, I'll carry on here. We'll finish off this story very quickly. When you take edible cannabis and the drug effects are delayed for about 3 hours, and you don't feel anything after an hour and a half, they may be prone to take additional doses to try and reach that high, he said. Once peak effect occurs, you have a phenomenon known as dose stacking, where you're stacking multiple doses together, and that's a contributor to poisoning. And again, it comes down to lack of education. The person doesn't understand that it takes time for the effect to come in. Stahl says the findings suggest there's room for improvement in education, ranging from public awareness to campaigns to clear dosage guidelines for older adults on cannabis packages. He also said healthcare providers should recognize many older adults are using cannabis and will be willing to have open and judgment-free conversations about its use. And this is what we were just talking about.
Absolutely.
And that's the end of that story there. So
yeah.
As
like
much as
more
probably is
labels for sure, because again, I've seen some of the OCS packaging, and it doesn't really have clear guidelines for dosing. It doesn't have warnings like, if you're on other medications, consult a physician. This could have unintended consequences. I don't even think there's a do not consume with alcohol label, because alcohol increases the effects of an edible, especially.
And in certain people, like if they've got a higher metabolism, then that plays into factor too, because their body's getting rid of certain things quicker, and so you don't really have a baseline really. And I know people who are like that, where their body just metabolizes things so quick that they have to be careful.
And experience too, right? If they've had recreational market stuff in the past, and they bake their own cookies, well, they're probably pretty knowledgeable and are okay to dose themselves with a legal market edible. But someone who doesn't have any experience, has never eaten an edible before, 10 milligrams could put them on their butt for some people, especially age and lack of experience. And I've seen that. Whereas 10 milligrams for a younger person might just be a good time, right?
Yes. And you know what? I've also, and talking about education, I know we're going on a lot here, but this is really good information. Um, I also know firsthand, not from me, but witnessed firsthand. Even a gummy that's a 4-to-1 CBD to THC, so 4 parts CBD, 1 part THC. That there, there's an individual that I know that they feel a little bit loopy. They feel the
Yeah,
THC, even though that's a 4-to-1 CBD. The CBD is not totally canceling out the effects of the THC. So it
yeah,
all goes in how that person's body metabolizes and breaks down uh, the product they're consuming. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, so like just because you got a high CBD doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to cancel out all the effects of the THC.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, we got to get moving on to our next story here. You can take this one away if you want.
Absolutely. So this one comes to us from CBC, and it's out of British Columbia. Air Canada wins the right to test flight attendants' hair for pot use. Employees' disturbing behavior reported by roommates in home that housed 14 Air Canada crew members. This comes to us from Jason Proctor at CBC News, and it was published May 29th of this year. A federal labor arbitrator has given Air Canada the green light to test a strand of a flight attendant's hair for drugs after two of the man's housemates and fellow employees claimed he was smoking a bong and making jokes about hijacking. According to a decision posted last week, the flight attendant, known as CB, was expelled from a home housing 14 Air Canada employees following a group meeting prompted by his behavior. Two of CB's fellow cabin crew members wrote reports which made their way to a Vancouver based service director manager for Air Canada, sparking a request for a strand of CB's with hair along with a battle between Air Canada or the airline and the Canadian Union of Public Employees. The decision provides a window into the lives and responsibilities of cabin crew members tasked with looking after the safety of passengers on the country's largest airline. It also highlights the question of hair strand testing, which the union was already in the process of grieving when CB's situation arose.
He referred to hijacking a plane. I guess that's just a quote within the article. Anyways, arbitrator William Kaplan was called in after CB had already volunteered a strand of his hair on April 18th for reasonable cause substance testing. The union filed what Kaplan called an extraordinary motion to prohibit Air Canada from relying on any information revealed by the test until CB got a chance to challenge the request. CB booked off sick in March and was slated to return to work in mid-April, but his housemates gathered on March 29th, voting to kick him out of the shared home as of May 1st, and encouraging CB to seek help through the company's employee assistance program. Unbeknownst to the union or CB, two of them also wrote letters to a supervisor. There's a quote here. He seemed dazed every other day and appeared to be under the influence of substances, Kaplan wrote, describing one complaint. According to this crew member, CB made some disturbing references to hijacking a plane, albeit with the intention of dark humor, but it still raised safety concerns. Kaplan said the second crew member said CB owned a bong and was using it to smoke pot, and was reported to have said that if he was caught by the company using marijuana, that he had other work options available, and he also referred to hijacking a plane again with dark humor. Yeah, I'm not sure how I've read the story ahead of time, and I'm not sure how I really feel about it. It's kind of a really weird story.
Yeah, it's kind of conflicting again. It's not like he's consuming it on the job. He's consuming it in his personal life. Again, it's a legal substance, but it sounds like he's got some dark humor, which is concerning, and that probably doesn't have much to do with his pot use. Maybe it's keeping it under control. I don't know. So, no right to control the lives of employees. Hair strand testing can detect substance use in the past 3 months, as opposed to saliva testing, which can only determine very recent consumption, and urine testing, which can detect pot use in the last 7 days. The company claimed that hair testing was necessary because more than 2 weeks had passed between the day CB's coworkers reported him and the day he was ordered in for screening. The union claimed it was given no notice that Air Canada planned to initiate hair strand testing for suspected substance use, arguing the move was in violation of rules governing the principles of collective agreements. Kaplan said the union claimed hair strand testing was an unacceptable intrusion into CB's personal life, and that employees who are not on duty or subject to duty can't be screened for substances unless random testing is part of a contract. Simply put, the company does not, union counsel argued, have any right to control the lives of its employees when they are not on duty, subject to duty, Kaplan wrote. By contrast, Air Canada argued that the company did not normally request hair strands tests. This case was an exception and one fully justified by facts. The risk of returning an employee to work in circumstances like those presented here far outweigh any of the identified interests of either the union or the griever, Kaplan wrote, stating the company's position. Those results need to be known, and if they indicate substance use, the company needs to take action.
Yeah, see, I've got mixed opinions on this. I'm not going to go into it, or whatever. But I kind of see it from both sides. Like it's just pot, but it's also
right.
It is like I don't know what position this person held. I don't know if it says it in the article.
He was a cabin crew member, so pushing the cart up and down the aisle and serving the people flying.
Yeah. Now, and again, I don't know what Air Canada's policies are specifically. And again, it may say it in the article, and I'm not going to go into much detail, but it is only just weed. But at the same time, it's their company. They've got a company. They can have policies, and if you don't agree with the policies, you don't have to work for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the same time, take the weed out of it, and you got the dark humor. And you're talking about hijacking a plane, and you're a crew member.
Well, yeah, it's a little sketchy.
I think that's the reason to be called in questioned more so than the weed, because you can have that dark humor with not being on any substance or being on a substance, and that dark humor may be completely innocent, but in a situation where you're at, may be completely inappropriate.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's my kind of take on the story.
Some people don't have those filters either, right? They just kind of say stupid shit and then be like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't have said that. I was kind of dumb.
So, anyways, and this goes into basically the next section here is basically what I was saying. Entirely legitimate safety interest. There's a couple, so something's been brought up to their attention. They need to investigate it, right?
Absolutely.
So Kaplan said the union was right to safeguard the privacy interest of its members, but sided with Air Canada. The arbitrator said the company had an entirely legitimate safety interest to protect. Indeed, in the face of those reports from the grievers' colleagues and housemates, it would have been derelict of the company to ignore the information it had received. That's basically what I just said. He said the company faced a quandary because only a hair strand testing would have revealed whether CB was using drugs at the time and when reports against him were filed 2 weeks before he was screened. Kaplan pointed out that Air Canada's policies prohibit cabin crew from using illegal drugs and marijuana at all times, even when not on duty or not in the workplace, except when prescribed as a medication. So there's your clarification right there.
Yeah.
He noted that the union can still fight management's handling of the case and any associated discipline, but said in the meantime, the hair strand test results will yield useful information. In a statement, Air Canada said, "We are pleased this decision confirms that safety is essential in our business." And at the end of the day, at the end of the story, I would have to agree with that one statement there. Essentially, that they received a complaint for safety concern. They had to investigate, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah. And I mean, we do know like transport truck drivers and stuff, they're subject to the same sort of screening because they're driving great big trucks down busy highways where people could be at risk. Again, if it's prescribed as a medication and they've been through the legal routes to get that prescription because they legitimately need it, which, you know, I can see that back issues, pain issues, sleep issues, being on the road all the time. Again, I would rather them be smoking some marijuana than popping oxys. Just saying. Saying.
Or foregoing the pills and cannabis and driving in pain because you're more impaired that way.
Right.
There's more than one way to be impaired for driving. You can be impaired with many other ways. So, anyways, we're moving on to our next story here, and this one here, I'm kind of excited to see this, but I'm a little concerned as to what direction the study may go in. Like what information are they going to put up that they're looking for?
Yeah,
pretty much. Are we actually going to see real information, or are we going to see a slanted view? So this story here is coming to us from the Edmonton Journal. New $280,000 study to examine effects of cannabis on young Albertans, published May 28th, 2024. 5 years into the legalization of cannabis, the Alberta government wants to know more about its effects on young Albertans. The study announced Monday will corral the expertise of drug policy and brain development experts to examine the impact of cannabis use on youth, defined as those 25 and under. Researchers from the University of Alberta, University of Calgary, Dalhousie University, Harvard Medical School, and the University of Birmingham are included in the $280,000 one-time grant.
Yeah. There are numerous studies about the effects of cannabis on the young, but the study will conduct a jurisdictional scan to survey the landscape of cannabis use in Alberta and other regions, said Dr. Sebastian Strobe, a professor and division director in the Division of Preventative Medicine at the University of Alberta. Among the provincial distinctions, Alberta is known for having a very high number of retail cannabis stores per population, while Quebec is known for restricting higher potency cannabis products. But there are many things to look at, Strobe said. There is assuming that someone is so, and then there's looking at the evidence and doing so in a systematic way and seeing that what the evidence shows to form the basis for policy recommendations, Strobe said. Albertans under 18 cannot legally buy or consume cannabis, same as Alberta's minimum wage for purchasing and consuming alcohol and tobacco. The province will be the first in Canada to include a detailed province-wide survey of young adults between 18 and 24 on the topic, said Blair Gibbs, former advisor to the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and policy consultant.
Yeah. The impacts of the nation's major cannabis reform take time to materialize, he said. We will, within the scope of this project, be able to do a new survey of Albertans from that age range, asking them about their attitudes to cannabis, consumer behavior, what is looked for in products that are available, and also how they perceive the risks of cannabis use in their use of cannabis. And things like related activity that can be risky, for example, driving while impaired after using cannabis, Gibbs said. There's another quote here: as cannabis products have become more widely available, we must continue to evaluate their health impacts, particularly on young people whose brains are still developing. I look forward to working with leading experts from around the world to closely examine the evidence and help inform decisions in the best interest of Albertans. The research team will report to the Minister of Health and Addiction. Following the review expected in September, evidence collected could inform future policy changes in Alberta and recommend policy changes to ensure children and youth are protected from the harms of cannabis, and said in a news release from Alberta Mental Health and Addictions Minister Dan Williams. Alberta spends more than $1.55 billion annually on addiction and mental health care and supports, including prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery.
So, news release warns of 420 health effects on mental health. The study's launch coincides with the news release from Alberta's Health Services about the effects of cannabis use on mental health. All forms of cannabis cause short-term and long-term health effects and can harm your mental health by worsening symptoms of bipolar, depression, and anxiety, increasing your risk for mental health disorders like schizophrenia, especially if you have a family history, and increasing your risks for thoughts of suicide and suicide attempts, the release stated. I'm going to keep my mouth shut there. The only way to completely avoid health risks related to cannabis to not consume it, the release says. If you are considering use of cannabis to manage stress, instead, you can visit Help in Tough Times for resources and services such as mental health wellness moments, Text for Hope, or AHS Mental Health online sessions. Those concerned about cannabis use in themselves or a loved one and need support can call the Addictions Help Hotline, and it lists the number there. So, so just saying, I happen to know that, there's many patients that have gone that route and not used cannabis and consumed pharmaceuticals and done therapy and so on and so forth and got nowhere real fast. And suddenly cannabis comes into their life and things get better. So, and they're doing it for mental health. Why? Because it worked. Better than anything else they have used. So I don't agree with their stance in this article. Just because they're health experts doesn't mean they are as educated as they need to be in the realm of actually knowing patients versus just their little online surveys that they might have sent out or so on and so forth. It doesn't really specify how all of that is accumulated. But my personal stance is that, is it for everyone? Not necessarily. However, it is being used in many studies to treat all of the above and having good effects. So their stance is not necessarily as scientific based as it could be.
Right. And remember what I said, stigma still exists?
Yes.
Here you go. And this one line here, this one stuck out to me. The only way to completely avoid health risks related to cannabis is not to consume it. That there statement is basically also on the Canadian Medical Association website.
Right.
That is essentially their stance on cannabis.
Yeah. But yet they made it legal.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the money. Right. Anyways.
Right. Yeah,
I think we're gonna. That's a good segue here into our break time, because you know what, it is medication time, and
it absolutely is. It's time to pay some bills. So stay tuned for a word from some of our sponsors, and then we'll be back with more articles making mainstream media news.
That's right. We'll be back in just a few minutes here, folks, here on the Ganja News Update on NOK Network.
Psychedelic Tuesdays on NOK Network. Tune in at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Psychedelic Reporters. Bufo Alvarius is scouring the news wires for stories being reported in the mainstream media on the psychedelic front and passing them on to Hobby's Puppets and Tarra Simpson so they can bring them to you, our listeners, in this 60-minute video news podcast. Tuesday evening news. Join us for Tuesday evening news each week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for all your news and information from the world of psychedelic medicine. Follow and subscribe to NOK Network on our webpage, social media, and streaming sites, including YouTube and Rumble.
Peace, news, and views on NOK Network. Patients everywhere advocating cannabis evolution with Kim Cooper and Sir Steve-O. Joint hosts interview people in the grassroots and corporate cannabis space across North America and beyond. Sit down with patients, entrepreneurs, lawyers, doctors, and others share their journey with this medicinal plant. So join us for Peace, News, and Views. Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, where all consumption is medicinal consumption on NOKnetwork.com. Follow and subscribe to NOK Network on social media and streaming sites including Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. Put it all away for 30 minutes a day on IWK. The IWK 710 Daily Sesh is a virtual gathering where consumers meet up for a toke and some laughs at 7 p.m. Eastern nightly. Originally aired on Info with Kim social media pages, the IWK 710 Daily Sesh is now also podcasted on NOK Network. Rotating joint hosts bring you a variety of content during this 30-minute virtual smoke sesh. Take a break from the stresses in life and put it all away for 30 minutes a day on IWK. Podcasted nightly at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on NOK Network.
Hey, dudes and dudettes. Enjoy the show, man.
And we're back from our medication session live here on Ganja News Updates on NOK Network.
And we have another set of stories coming at you, making cannabis news. So let's get at it. And just give me 1 second here. Our next story, we have a bit of a block. I'm surprised. It's from Benzinga. but I'm just seeing if I got a quick workaround. If we can't get it open in a second, we will move on to our next one.
Perfect.
Yeah, geez. Sorry, folks. We're just going to try this 1 second here. And I think for now, we'll move over to the next one. And we'll wait. I'll see if the other one comes up. So we'll move to our next story in line. So we're going to go over to the one from Marijuana Moment. Let me bring that up on screen. There we go. South African president signs marijuana legalization bill into law. Published on May 28th, 2024 by Tom Angel. South Africa's president has signed a bill to legalize marijuana possession and cultivation by adults. President Cyril Ramaphosa gave his approval to the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act, CFPPA, on Tuesday, just 1 day ahead of national elections. The National Assembly had passed the legislation last November, and the National Council of Provinces signed off in February. The reform has been years in the making, with lawmakers well past the deadline following a constitutional court ruling in 2018 that deemed the prohibition on simple possession and cultivation of cannabis to be unlawful, mandating legislative change within 2 years. The bill to codify legalization was finally introduced in 2020, but action had been delayed even as South Africa's government had included cannabis in a list of sectors to prioritize in the interest of economic expansion.
Yeah, the consequent regulatory reform enabled the CFPPA will, amongst others, entirely remove cannabis from the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act, the president's office said in a press release on Tuesday. This will further enable amendments of the schedule to make the Medicines and Related Substances Act and provide for targeted regulatory reform in the Plant Breeders' Rights Act and the Plant Improvement Act, as well as other pieces of legislation require amendments to allow for the industrialization of the cannabis sector. The bill further guides the medically prescribed administration of cannabis to a child while also protecting children from undue exposure to cannabis, the president's office said. It provides for an alternate manner by which to address the issue of prohibited use, possession of, or dealing in cannabis by children with due regard to the best interest of the child. It also prohibits the dealing in cannabis. Lawmakers have emphasized that the measure does not permit for lawful sales of cannabis. Adults will need to grow their own plants, and they could only consume in their private residences. The legalization further provides for expungements of prior marijuana possession and cultivation convictions. That's interesting.
Yeah, this is like I when I came across this, I had never heard anything about South Africa before. I didn't know what their stance was, and apparently this has
always been
highly
illegal there. Yeah, I visited South Africa twice in many years, and yeah, it wasn't legal. You couldn't find it anywhere, unless you went into the ghettos, which you didn't do because you'd likely be killed. There's parts you just don't go. As a tourist, you just don't do it. So you couldn't locate it, not safely. That's for sure. Parliament spokesperson.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Parliament spokesperson Moloto Mathapo said that it's in the government's hope that the non-commercialized legalization bill will serve as a jumping off point for lawmakers to enact more robust regulations to support the establishment of the marijuana market in the country. The president said in his State of National Address in 2022 that he wants to his country. Why is that not making sense to me? That he wants to the country enter the global medical hemp and cannabis industry, arguing that it could generate more than 100,000 jobs. Wow, that's cool.
I think it's supposed to, he wants his country to enter the global
medical.
Yeah. There's a bit of a typo in there, but that's fairly interesting that they're pushing that.
Absolutely.
And so many jobs. Yeah. We've got just a few more. I'll finish off here. For now, however, the new law is focused on removing criminal penalties in accordance with the Constitutional Court's unanimous 2018 ruling, which followed a lower court decision in the Western Cape province covering Cape Town to end prohibition. Similar to South Africa, Mexico's Supreme Court ruled in 2018 that marijuana criminalization is unconstitutional, giving lawmakers a mandate to revise the laws. That reform has advanced in recent sessions, but it's yet to be enacted. So very interesting stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, they're a little behind the times, but I like that they're going in that direction and actually going to be farming cannabis possibly there and creating jobs, which, I mean, that country is in turmoil as far as, the immigration and stuff that's happened over the many, many years from everyone coming in from the other countries that were going through their own political upheavals. So there's not a lot of jobs. And maybe this will help. Maybe that'll help the economic situation there for some people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So this is definitely a story that we're going to be following along with. Mm-hmm. So, you know what? Our fourth story in the lineup that we had, I can't get it to open.
Okay, so we'll just move along to the last one then.
We'll just skip and we'll just go to the last one, which is a really cool story too, by the way.
Absolutely.
We've got a lot of everything we bring here is a cool story, right? Because after all, it is Ganja News Update, right? So here we go. I'll let you take this one away if you want.
So this one comes to us from Marijuana Moments. Marijuana terpenes are as effective as morphine for pain relief and have fewer side effects, new study finds. And this is published on May 30th of this year by Ben Aldlin. A new federally funded study into the effects of cannabis terpenes suggests that the compound could be potential therapeutics for chronic neuropathic pain, finding that an injected dose of the compound produced roughly equal reduction in pain markers when they compared it to a smaller dose of morphine. Terpenes also appeared to enhance the efficacy of morphine when given in combination, like we said in that one article about drugs and cannabis, right? Unlike the morphine, however, none of this studied terpenes produced.
Go ahead.
Okay. Unlike with morphine, however, none of the studied terpenes produced a meaningful reward response that research found, indicating that the terpenes could be effective analgesics with no reward or dysphoric side effects, which is, right, pain and pleasure. That's the opioid receptor. Notably terpenes that were vaporized or administered orally seem to have little impact on pain. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that because I'm not sure like what source is. Number one, what's the source of the terpenes? Like, where are they
Right.
getting the terpenes from? Because you can get terpenes from many different plants, right?
Yeah.
And also they can be synthetically created. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure where they're. You need a little bit more information there, because I certainly have experience with firsthand experience with using linalool in any, not directly, not just a standalone terpene, but I seek out strains of cannabis that has the terpene linalool in it,
Right.
which is lilacs, lavender, also have linalool in.
Absolutely.
And linalool is supposedly a good analgesic for neuropathic pain, which I have with
Right.
my back issues. So
So
I've been
certain
quite
strains.
successful in using
Yeah.
certain
Absolutely.
strains. Yeah. Now it may be a combination of terpenes that I'm getting the benefit from, just the same as they're doing the combination of the morphine and the terpene.
Right.
So that can be a factor as well. But also, it's just interesting because I was on hydromorph, a very low dose of hydromorph, but they're
Mhm.
saying here that terpenes do increase the efficacy of the morphine. So I was having some of the extreme rare side effects with on the low dose of morphine, but
Mhm.
with the use of cannabis was probably putting me into a range of toxicity with the morphine, the hydromorph,
Yeah, absolutely. It can happen, right?
because of it, yeah. So that's related to our first story that we did with sending people to the ER too,
Absolutely.
because you have unintended consequences that you're not sure how all this is happening. So,
Absolutely.
anyways, moving on, because time is moving on here. The paper terpenes from cannabis sativa induce anti nociception, in a mouse model of chronic neuropathic pain via activation of adenosine A2A receptors, was published this month in Pain, the Journal of International Association for the Study of Pain. The 14-author team behind the report includes researchers from the University of Arizona's Comprehensive Center for Pain and Addiction, as well as the National Institute of Health, the NIH. There's a quote: "A question that we've been very interested in could terpenes be used to manage chronic pain?" Lead researcher John Stryker, a professor of pharmacology at the University of Arizona's College of Medicine in Tucson, said in a press release about the study. What we found is that terpenes are really good at relieving a specific type of chronic pain with side effects that are low and manageable. Authors note that while primary chemical components in marijuana like THC and CBD have been shown in some studies to be effective in managing chronic pain, their efficacy is generally moderate, and THC is burdened by unwanted psychoactive side effects. These limits have focused attention on other potentially therapeutic components of cannabis, they wrote, including minor cannabinoids, flavonoids, and terpenes. Yeah, it's really nice to see that that they're starting to look into this, because I've been saying for years, like I've only been consuming cannabis since 2017,
Right.
and seriously just for the last since about 2019,
Right.
for the purpose of getting off of it. And the terpene, that's where I've had the best success, is
Absolutely.
with learning
Yeah.
which terpene
And prior to these studies being
strain
done,
things that
right?
I work with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
So now they're
right.
doing more studies on what we've been saying for years in the medical community of cannabis, that certain terpenes, right? Like when I first became a medical cannabis patient, I had no idea about strains or any of that. I had smoked weed in my teen years, became a mom, did the whole PTA thing, soccer mom, all that stuff, and then pharmaceuticals. So when this came along and it actually worked, I needed to know why it worked. And then I needed to know more about how I could possibly control my pain better by using certain strains and certain forms of consumption. So, and that started in 2012, so long before these studies were done. So it's great to see they're finally listening and doing some research in this area. So the article continues
100%.
with, while many plants produce terpenes, the terpene pinene, for example, is not only made by cannabis, but it's also pine and cedar trees, oranges and rosemary. The study explains that cannabis is an outlier in its chemical creation. While most other plants have two dominating terpene species, cannabis contains up to 150 terpenes, with multiple terpenes acting as dominant species. The study says, adding that the complexity of the cannabis chemover may determine the different biological effects caused by the different strains of cannabis. While newly published research looked at 5 terpenes, alpha humulene, beta carphenol, beta pinene, geraniol, and linalool, which authors said are found in moderate to high levels within cannabis. Solutions of terpenes were injected into mice to test how they influenced measures of both peripheral neuropathic pain and inflammatory pain, which were induced in the mice through chemotherapy drugs and injected into animals' hind paws, respectively. Terpenes were also given to the mice orally via vaporization. Each terpene was tested individually along with morphine comparison for efficacy. Authors explained terpene dosages were 200 milligrams per kilogram, while the morphine comparison was 10 milligrams per kilogram. Yeah.
The goal of the study was not only to measure whether terpenes relieved pain in mice, but also the mechanism behind any pain relief. That meant not only observing the animal's behavior, but also evaluating cell function by, for example, flash freezing skin from mouse paws and evaluating its mRNA. Not sure if I'm that particular about their methods of testing, but we'll
No,
leave it at that. We're reading the news. We're reading the news. So findings showed that all the tested terpenes seemed to reduce markers of neuropathic pain, while all terpenes except pinene appeared to treat inflammatory pain. Taken together, this evidence suggests that all terpenes produce robust and antinoception. The study says of the results for neuropathic pain. For inflammatory pain, it continues, all terpenes except B-pinene are effective antinoceptive agents in the second different pathological type pain. Combining even lower doses of cannabis terpenes and morphine, meanwhile, seem to produce an even stronger pain-relieving effect. This brings up the idea that you could have a combination therapy, an opioid with a high level of terpene that could actually make the pain relief better while blocking the addiction potential of opioids, Stryker said. That's what we're looking at now. As for whether or not terpenes have reward liability, researchers found that crucially both geraniol and linalool showed neutral conditioning, whether preference nor aversion, suggesting they do not cause reward or dysphoria.
Wow, that's very interesting. When combined with
very interesting stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were you saying?
No, I was just saying there's very interesting stuff that's coming out now with all this.
Absolutely. When combined with our pain data above, they said of the 2 terpenes, this suggests these terpenes could be effective analgesics with no rewarding or dysphoric side effects. In contrast, both A-humulin and B-carphenolene showed a significant
place aversion, suggesting they may be dysphoric under these treatment conditions, results showed, while beta-pinene also indicated potential adversive dysphoric side effects. Overall, these results suggest that no terpene has reward liability. Some have neither reward or aversion liability, while some have adversive liability. Authors wrote, these observations are crucial when evaluating the potential clinical utility of these litigants as pain drugs. As Stryver explained, what we found was, yes, terpenes do relieve pain, and they also have a pretty good side effect profile. The method of application also mattered. The study focused on injected terpenes, which authors acknowledge is not very transitionally relevant to human use. However, terpenes given to mice orally through vaporization had little observant impact on pain markers, and in some cases they produced modest side effects such as hypothermia. Researchers concluded that terpenes administered orally or through inhalation have limited bioavailability.
Yeah. A lot of people vape or smoke terpenes as part of cannabis extracts that are available commercially in states where cannabis use is legal, Stryker said in the university release. We were surprised to find that the inhalation route didn't have an impact in the study because there are a lot of at least anecdotal reports saying that you can get the effects of terpenes whether taken orally or inhaled. Part of the compounding factor is that terpenes smell quite nice and it's hard to disguise that aroma. So people could be kind of having a psychosomatic placebo-style effect. Has this person never heard of aromatherapy?
Right.
Because aromatherapy is what he just described there.
Right.
It's terpenes. It's the essential oils of the plants.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure. Examination of how terpenes worked on a mechanistic level suggested that terpenes may play an anti-inflammatory role, in addition to interacting directly with some receptors in the nervous system. The findings suggested that the terpenes are A2AR agonists, as they evoked CAMP accumulation by the A2AR. Wow, they're getting really scientific here.
Yeah.
However, the exact nature of the mechanism is not clear, the study says. The terpenes did not compete with the osteotheric radioligand, similar to our results with the CBR1, suggesting that they might be allosteric agonists. However, our modeling studies suggested a mechanism, the terpenes, to bind and activate the A2AR in the osteric site. Wow. I'm just going to scan ahead and see how long this article is here. It's a little bit longer. We'll skim through, I guess, some of the last bits because I don't want to really read all of it per se, especially if it's going to be all scientific like that. Let's just see. There's work will need to disentangle these mechanisms of selective receptor engagement in different pain sites. So they're looking at at how the terpenes affect different pain receptors and stuff like that. And they're looking at it from a depth level. I'm not going to read all through this because it's kind of complicated reading. But it's just the kind of overview is that they're looking in depth into this, and they're saying that some of the terpenes also do produce some psychoactive effects. That's really interesting that they said that, because I have had strains of weed, and not just me, I've heard other people say this, that have been low THC. I've had strains of weed that were literally, it was 9% THC, but it hit me like it was 20 plus. That's why I believe, because I was searching out specific terpenes, linalool being one of them, and I believe one or two of the other ones that they mentioned. Linalool is one, but one of the two other ones, some of the other ones that they mentioned that do have psychoactive effects, that they see,
Right.
that they kind of seen.
Yeah.
Those were one. And I think also what happens is when you get combinations of terpenes, but I think it's even deeper than that. It's based on your own individual physiology, the way your body reacts to those terpenes. I honestly think cannabis hypermesis, or however you say that, is it is a real thing, but not because, not specific, not for the reasons why people think that it is. I think it's
right.
it's
a lot of people think it's cannabis.
Oversaturation. Yeah, I think it's an
terpene
oversaturation,
strain.
not necessarily of THC. It's of certain
Yeah.
terpenes or combinations or reactions, allergic reactions to combinations of terpenes.
Absolutely. If
most
you're
of what I
allergic
see
to
in this,
citrus fruit, you shouldn't consume a citrus terpene.
right? And what I've noticed with a lot of these type of people who have these kind of reactions with weed, they also have food sensitivities and
Right.
gut issues.
Right.
Serious gut issues. So I think that's where I'm. That might be the weed smoke, the weed smoking. That might be the weed talking. But I think there's something to it, and some of it we're seeing in this article here.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to really. I don't think we really need to read through any more of it. People, if you want to read through, you can read the rest of it. It's just that they're just talking about more. That they're going to go more in depth. They're looking at flavonoids, collaborative interactions between cannabinoids, flavonoids, and other molecules in the plant. It's exactly what I was just talking about there.
Yeah.
Look at this. Found that smelling terpene, lemonade goodies, anxiety, and associated with, but if you're allergic to anything that's citrusy or whatever, well, it may have the opposite effects.
Absolutely. And that could be where some people are consuming these citrusy things, have a food allergy to a citrus, and then they end up with increased anxiety and paranoia and possibly even, like greening out effects and making them sick because they're poisoning themselves with a terpene that's also found in their food that they can't consume. So if you can't consume it because you're allergic to it as a food, you probably should avoid strains with those types of profiles.
Yeah. And how I choose my weed, I shop by I choose if I'm buying seeds or trying to find seeds from someone or whatever, or I'm buying somewhere, I'm shopping based on the terpenes that are in there and the terpene profiles. I'm not basing on the highest THC.
No.
So
because we know that the THC works in synergy with the other stuff, right? The terpenes.
Yeah. Well, look at this highest highlighted thing here, and this isn't talking about the synergy, but it's talking about what I just said. A separate study last year found that cannabis products with a more diverse array of natural cannabinoids produced a stronger psychoactive experiences in adults, which also lasted longer than the high generated by pure THC.
Right. So there you have it.
Terpenes play a huge role.
Yes.
In all this. Much more than the high THC, which makes it more ridiculous about them taxing weed or cannabis based on the THC levels is utter ridiculousness.
Absolutely.
And just goes to prove that it's all about the money and greed.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing what we're doing, bringing you guys the news that we are bringing to tell you what it really is.
Yes.
So, anyways, I guess that's the end of our stories here for this week, folks. Do thank you all for joining us here this week on Ganja News Update here on NOK Network, and for tuning in to our video podcast on NOK Network's Rumble and social media sites, such as LinkedIn, X. I'm forgetting some of them. Anyways, there's a whole bunch out there. Go check us out. Yeah, we used to be on YouTube, but YouTube didn't like what we had to say. So sorry, folks. But I do believe we do broadcast onto my own YouTube channel. for my podcast. So you can find us on there, Grow 420. But as for the network, YouTube, that was taken down. So over to you, Tarra, for your closing
All right.
lines.
We hope you enjoyed our update of mainstream media coverage of cannabis news and information from around the globe.
And many thanks to our sponsors for making this show possible. And thanks to my joint host, Tarra. And to you, our listeners, for joining us here each week for Education Mondays with the Ganja News Update on NOK Network. Peace, everyone. Good night. See you next week. Have a great night. Take care.
See ya.
Ganja me meditation, ganja my pain. Ganja we take away my stress and strain. Ganja me meditation, ganja my pain. Marijuana take away my stress and pain. Ganja me meditation, ganja my pain. Marijuana take away the stress and pain. Ganja is the medication, ganja is the cure. Police of them a fight the marijuana for sure. Purify me heavens and they make me feel pure. 100 way to Cali, we be bring it on tour. Ganja in the meditation, ganja in my clothes. No offense, I'm smoking marijuana around you. Ganja in me daily, ganja me currency. Ganja is the currency and daily pay. Give me the revelation, it's not to get too much credit and growing. So long, that's why we call it.